the funny thing is that for big clubs, they have the luxury of not playing Cole Palmer and Coote and still win because of the high level of competition. The imagination now is that these clubs players are going to go, so they will come back tired, and we would be well rested and ready to go.
On this episode of the Beer Parlour, we'll be going through some of the top issues that have happened in the world of football recently. And especially in England, there's been a lot of chaos around refereeing trust, and how certain biases have been playing. And I know, like, if you watch the EPL, these issues have been undertone a lot. Even at the start of this season, Wolves versus Manchester City, Gary O'Neill plainly said he has a feeling there is some subconscious bias that referees do not even know exists, but plays into their decisions. And this week, or let me say last weekend till now, there's been a controversy that has rocked the world of English football with David Coote's video that came out with him saying he hated Liverpool, didn't like Jurgen Klopp. And also there was a subsequent video that was released about him doing some drugs or some white substances, if you might say. Recently, there's also been some controversies and some chats that have been released about him making arrangements for parties and drinking just few minutes to a game and even during halftime as well. Uh, Erasmus, people beg the question to ask, do we even need referees at all? Because at this point, they are creating more chaos than creating stability in the game.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to our listeners. Why do you have to do this all the time?
I
Come
just
on.
knew you were going to greet. Just, what is all this? Me, I've opened the show. I've asked you a question. You have to be the nice person to greet people and just make me look bad.
See, I'm sorry. Last episode I raised this, and you didn't learn your lesson, so I'm continuing unabated.
You want us to
Anyway,
transition to tree so that it feels familiar. In Yanomni
yes,
Adolfo.
yes. If we were speaking, by the way, Tree is the um, dominant Ghanaian local language, so we can probably do that and introduce our audience to it. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for the question. I think if you think about the role that referees play within the sports, they play a very very crucial role. But what's to be underlined about referees is just how much the spotlight is not put on them. They end up being at the center of very, very crucial decisions and end up facilitating the game for us. Without referees, there's no way
Yeah,
we play the game. In fact, without referees, there's no way any sides play the game because the whole ethos of sports is to have two people competing, and in order for competition to remain consistent and remain consistent and valuable, it needs to be fair. And part of that fairness is having someone who is neutral, who is there facilitating the game to ensure that both sides are obeying the rules. So if you think about the role referees play in that manner, then you think it's a very, very important role. But I think there's just very, very, very limited information that fans have with regards to referees, with regards to what they do, with regards to what they're supposed to do, with regards to the discourse around them. And I think many a times people have come to put referees in the spotlight, and we've seen certain instances where their decision making has been questioned because generally referees are human beings and therefore they are prone to make certain errors. And given how important they are, their errors will be scrutinized with the biggest microscope there is ever in football. So maybe this is a very good opportunity to also educate the public about referees, what they do, what are the circumstances, how they even get made up, and to put some perspective on some of the issues that come out from sports.
yeah. But I mean, in relation to this specific issue, do you really think referees are neutral? because there's this cloak of neutrality that is created around them that sort of also exists within their rules, that sort of places a restriction on them as to the expression of their support, their fandom, and their relations with other clubs, which boyhood clubs did they have, and all that. Can they truly be neutral? And should the refereeing association still go ahead to try and create this cloak of neutrality around them, or do you think it's time where we actually open the Pandora's box, allow referees to declare their support to various teams, and then establish clear conflicts so they do not referee matches involving those teams? Because we do this in debating all the time, where you declare if you have a clash against a person or even institutional affiliation, you just don't judge them. So can't we transfer that same principle to refereeing in football matches?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like if you think about it, we are dealing with more of an existential question for football. And when I
Yeah,
say an existential question, it's a question that has always been there since the beginning of time. That is central to their role as referees. Like if you think about it, judges in the Supreme Court in America, for example, where we know their colors or we know their badges, we know which of them are conservative, which of them are Democrats as a
yeah,
result of their own proclamations or their history.
yeah,
And I think it's no news that some of these referees do have histories. I think it would be unfair to say that these adjustments which we are talking about have never been considered within football. In fact, they are considered. And when we go to international tournaments, for example, referees from specific geographic regions, like their countries or neighboring countries, or sometimes even to the point of their identity, are just not allowed to referee certain games due to the proximity to those
yeah,
teams. I think same is done within club football, like the home region which you came from, any especially in England, we know that most people support teams from the home region where they came from. So
yeah,
referees are just not allowed to referee teams from their home region and teams that they know to have a very, very clear affiliation from. I think
yeah,
where the difficulty comes in and where the David Coote situation comes in is in um, the teams that you hate, because
yeah,
it's very easy to tell the teams that you love, but
yeah,
teams that you hate, you just naturally would hate anybody. And there's been talks to extend the verification of bias, or like identification of bias in referees. There's been talks to extend it to rival fans, and in
yeah,
some situations like Liverpool versus Everton, like if you are a clear Evertonian fan, you maybe not be allowed to referee against Liverpool. But to what extent do we stretch this bias, given
yeah,
that any team could legitimately be a competition
yeah,
to you? So I don't think the discourse is that these considerations for bias has never existed, but it's to what point we are able to stretch this to ensure that it is not happening. But the second part of my answer also is that referees are inherently trained to avoid bias. So the truth is that there's bias in almost any situation that we can talk about. Like
yeah,
even me and you on this podcast, many times we've had to pick a side, like
yeah.
whether Ten Hag should stay or not, and there's been clear bias that you have against Ten Hag, but we've
Who
still
has
been
clear
able to have a
bias?
discussion. Because the whole point, like in debates, just like you said, there are
Yeah,
judges who can sometimes have bias, like, but
yeah,
these biases are undeclared biases and they're unconscious biases. But what we do in terms of our training is always training people on how to be impartial and fair, how to be able to set aside your bias, how to identify that bias and also be able to set it aside. So we speak about the anchoring effect, we speak about recency bias, amongst a number of things to help individuals uncover their own biases. And I think the best decision makers in the world, even moving away from referee, just in general in life, are people who are able to recognize their own biases. So it can be trained, and the point is that referees should have the ability to be able to put it aside and work. But the point
yeah.
is, would you trust them to do so in those instances? And that's why we take proactive steps to help them reduce that bias. Yeah.
Two follow-up questions before we wrap this part of the conversation up. One is that I know the PGMOL, which is the refereeing agency, what do you call it, supervisory agency in the Premier League, since last season, or I think at the start of this season, requests referees to disclose the teams that they support.
Mhm.
But this disclosure is kept within the supervisory agency and not disclosed to fans. Do you think we should open that transparency and extend it to the supporters of football teams to say these are the teams that these specific referees support and not just keep it within the association? Because I recognize two things. One is keeping it within the association and not letting people know. To the fans, there is nothing different that's ongoing. It's still the same old absence of knowledge about the the leanings or the support leanings of referees, and so they are still have the room to speculate as much as they want. But the other part is, what if letting them know would actually make the speculations worse? Because now they would probably go back and scrutinize every single decision a particular referee has made in regarding their matches that they've played. They would question the integrity of referees, and maybe that might even make things worse in terms of the public scrutiny and the pressure that referees come under. So I don't know. It's like this tough dilemma that you find yourself in, and I'm not sure what do you think about it.
Yeah, so I I believe that the status quo works. I do think that there are a lot way more advantages with letting people know um the open declarations of referees. One, it
Yeah,
doesn't help the clubs in any way. Like it puts unwanted and undue pressure on them. And I think even if it is still not uh I think it's even if we know that, like for example, these referees are not refereeing them, it allows people to spin narratives and it allows for more confusion. I think we need trust in order to do the work that we want to do. And we've sat on this podcast to discuss the decision making of authorities in football. But for football
yeah,
to work, we need trust. Like I think it's a bit evident of what we are seeing within the social landscape, especially with the
yeah,
introduction of social media. Fans are very, very um they scrutinize everything and we're a bit distrusting of authority. We live in a very, very skeptical age. And I think part of that also trickles into football. People are
yeah,
beginning to question, for example, the invincibility of associations like UEFA and FIFA,
yeah,
um, and seeing how can we challenge, can we undermine what they've done. Previously, no one no one gave a rat's ass.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
no, like we just went and enjoyed the football.
I think
But
it's the
now,
thing where lots of people thought it, but people didn't have a unified place to verify that other people were thinking about it to catch on a trend.
yeah,
Now
people
they
are
make
looking
a
for it.
post, and other people have the room to validate that expression or that thinking line.
Exactly.
And so it makes it easier for people to just be grow in confidence and challenge things all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think that's what it is. Like social media has become a sounding board for
Yeah,
your ideas and people are able to get validation for the thoughts which they have. That being said, I don't think it should be put out there. For some reason, some people know, which is fine because you can't control that. But I
yeah,
don't think it should be put out there. Rather, I think we should be taking up more steps to be able to help referees. Um I don't know if it's a conversation we'll come to, but the use of technology has been awesome in being able to ensure neutrality. Like referees know they are accountable. Some of their decisions can be overturned. So if people need to realize that the margin for referees being able to steal for their clubs is also very, 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 very slim. Like there
yeah,
are obviously lots of measures which are in place, like the use of technology, like I said, which automates some decisions, like the offside decision is now automated, the
yeah,
goal line decision is now automated, and we've taken those kind of decisions from referees. So
yeah,
very, very high impact decisions have been taken from referees. Referees are having help with very, very high impact decisions like penalties with the use of VAR. Now there are independent oversight panels which looks at like key match incidents and review them. And so you see a PGMO statement after every game where they say, "Oh, in this situation it should have been offside," which means
yeah,
that we are using those opportunities to educate ourselves and re-educate the referees on what they should be doing in those scenarios. So referees become sort of like really, really smarter. And then already like the appointments and the geographic using the geographical bias, which we spoke about in the beginning. So it's not like nothing is happening and referees can just go about and give off decisions to their people. But obviously, with all measures, it can be improved
Yeah.
and people can also always take advantage of it. I really don't think referees are going out there thinking, I'm going out there to be the worst person I can be. I think sometimes it has to do with quality and then also their ideology. Like if you look at referees within UEFA, they are a bit like the referees in Spain are a bit more softer. They
Yeah.
feel games should be able to flow. They sometimes allow for lesser physicality. Um,
Yeah.
like they can,
EPL managers are on the other side. They allow more.
yes, yes,
They allow things to
yes,
pass. Yeah.
yes. Referees also have personality. Like if you speak to coaches. Like I've heard coaches and players speak, and they know referees. Like even if
Yeah.
you've played football, or you know referees saying, "Oh, this referee, when we go there today, let's take it easy because he's quite big on." And sometimes you may enter into the game, first challenge, second challenge, realize the referee is giving it. So today the referee is allowing things to flow.
Yeah.
So we forget that all these individual things add a flavor to how the game can be managed. And in the end, I think referees are taking a more pivotal role in just not um what you call it, managing whether the game is fair or not. Like just like judges, if they were to stick to whatever everything that's by the book, it can ruin entertainment too. And I think the
Yeah.
burden put on referees to be able to sort of ensure the balance sometimes can also be hard. Like when do you let certain decisions go? When do you call back certain decisions? Are you strict on certain? We saw, for example, Arsenal taking a set piece where the defender touched the ball and they
Yeah.
were let go. And
Yeah.
then on another piece,
Yeah. It was
Aston
given
Villa
as a,
they
yeah,
were
Aston
punished.
Villa was given
That
as a
was the
penalty.
only goal in the game. Yeah, that was the only goal in the game. They lost
Yeah.
the game, and like the referee threw away the game. We've seen games, Manchester City versus Liverpool, where we're like, the referee threw away the game. So we need to understand that it's not just about fairness. There's a lot more responsibility put on some of these referees in terms of how they manage the perception and in terms of how they even manage the way the game is played. So
Yeah.
it's not an easy job, and I don't think they are perfect people, but I just think we just need to do more to help them.
Two, a two in one follow up, and then we can wrap up with this, which is I think it's true that the introduction of technology is helping. The entirely automated ones, I don't think a lot of people have issues with it, like goal line technology, the offside checks. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. VAR has been the big one, not just because referees themselves sometimes get it wrong, but also the fact that these video assistant referees who are using these technological tools and reviewing are also part of the bunch of referees who might be under the same conversation. So David Coote in one match could be on the pitch, in another match could be VAR for another incident. And so he is not just the one making the mistakes for someone external to regulate. He could also find himself in positions where he is the one regulating the mistakes of others. And people have called into question some penalty decisions that he didn't call for them to go and check on the screen, and some others that he did. And you realize that VAR as a support system, given that it equally needs the interference of these very same referees is supposed to support, then weighs off in terms of how efficient or effective it is. But then on the same front, like you said, even if we allow referees to disclose their support or let us know which clubs they hate, really, how far are we willing to take those steps in terms of locking them out of certain matches? Because if you're a diehard Liverpool fan, now you are competing with Manchester City. We know you are rivals with Everton. You are also maybe rivals with United. Should we block you from judging from refereeing all these three teams, in addition to your own club, which is Liverpool? or how do we go about it? And it sounds like a complex web where it's like maybe it's even safer if we don't know. But now, if we know, to what degree do we utilize that information to make it affect decisions on referee allocations?
So it's a very difficult um situation, because if you think about it, for example, in the Premier League there are 20 uh professional referees within the league, and the process to become a referee is quite rigorous. So
Okay.
you don't see new referees added each and every day. Like the standard taken to get
Right.
them up there. Yeah, and there are people who talk about expanding the referee pool. For example, like referee pools have been seen to be less diversified, like
Yeah.
in the major leagues, particularly in the EPL. For example, we've seen that it's dominated by white
Yeah.
males. So there are less women, there are less people of color who are taking up refereeing. So there are concerns about the referee selection process and whether in itself it needs to be expanded. And when you talk about them sort of being the same ones to take care of the other parts of the technology, I think the we should continue to design technology that seeks to become more autonomous. And most of the time, when they are sitting there, it's just they manipulating the technology, them not them ultimately taking decisions. So if you think about VAR, ultimate decision is taken by the referee. Like the referee's decision is made easier by the goal line technology, but it doesn't mean the goal line technology is the one making the decisions.
Yeah.
Ultimately, all of these things is to help the referee make better decisions. So I don't think there's a huge impact if they are the same ones sitting behind VAR, etc. Like, for example, if you listen to the voice tapes which have come out of certain decisions, you realize that it's a more collaborative environment where different people need to speak and need to challenge themselves.
Yeah.
There's someone who says go to the screen, but ultimately you have the referee going to the screen. So all I'm just trying to say is that um, if there is, it doesn't matter where they sit. If there is bias, there's still efforts to be able to reduce it, and any efforts we are making should seek to apply to referees in general. But yeah, I think there's still more we can do in terms of the referee selection process, make it a bit more rigorous and expand it also.
Yeah. Interesting. So there are a few more issues. Let's get your thoughts on them and then we can wrap up this conversation. The first one is post COVID financial crisis for clubs have been a big thing. We've seen some clubs come under penalties for point deduction, like Everton last season. And now Olympic Lyon has been provisionally relegated. What did I say? Regulate? Hey, relegated into League Two, which is a French League Two, mainly because of financial reasons. Which means if they are not able to settle their books by the end of this season, next season they would have to start in the second tier league. What do you know about it so far? What are your thoughts on it? Do you think at this point football regulatory authorities should still be a little bit more lenient on clubs to give them more time to balance their books, given that look, our motherland, Ghana, Accra, they've not managed to balance their books post COVID, let alone football clubs.
So, Andy, like I have a suggestion. We should do a comprehensive episode on uh, club finances and club health.
Yeah,
What supporters and fans don't know is that there we are so close. We are so close to having the game taken away from us like this in the path.
yeah,
We are very, very close to that point. The way clubs are being managed in general
yeah.
is not sustainable. There is not a single club in the world, but there's not a single club in the world which runs and makes profits. Not a single one in the world.
Not even Real Madrid.
No,
Wow.
no. There's not a single club that sustainable runs making profits, that
Yeah.
runs and makes revenue by itself and
Balances
makes
their
profit,
books. Yeah.
balances their own books. most most of the balancing of books usually has to come from uh, external sponsorship mainly. Like
Yeah,
football relies hugely on external and sponsorship and owner investment in
yeah,
order to stay afloat. So most sports models are not sustainable. When we spoke about the impact of the Neymar transfer, people talk about
yeah,
the
yeah,
Pogba
yeah,
Neymar transfer, and you saw a lot of club directors and executives come out and scream about it. It
yeah,
was because it was basically football's own financial crisis in a way, like where we saw inflation rise up and the way in which football did business changed. Like now we're talking about millions of dollars, like the
yeah.
hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of
You know,
buying players.
we spoke about the number of games and the number of competitions and player fatigue and all that. And when
Mm,
I think the UEFA president is asked about it, he says, for instance, if you want us to cut down games, then let's cut down the perks that come with football, cut down the salaries, cut down player price tags, because that is what is creating the demand for teams to generate more revenue and thereby creating this race towards as many competition and as many revenue that they can come up with as possible.
yeah. Yeah, and I think at a point, really, there's a lot of conversations that, and as the podcast that we are, that we like to set our sights for, there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had, and I'm aware we need to talk about the Olympic Lyon issue.
Yeah,
But for example, we need to have a discussion, right? We look at there are multiple levels of football. For example, in England, there's football to there's even semi-pro leagues,
yeah,
right? Which most of them don't sustain themselves.
yeah,
Like women's leagues in most countries is supported by the parent club. So Chelsea women's club, for example, is supported by the Chelsea men's team in essence, because
yeah,
they are not making revenue of their own. And this is because revenue is dependent on fans and patronage. And football has become so even though football has become so popular, it's become sharper at the edge. It's
yeah,
become more effective at the edge. At the top leagues, you're having this match competition, and it's the same crowd, right?
yeah,
So most people would go back and support the lower league sides because it comes from their
yeah.
towns and their communities, and they feel like they need to support it. But beyond that, a lot of the new audience which is pulled in is pulled
Go to the top
towards
tier.
one source.
Yeah,
Yes. So most of them are pulling towards the English Premier League. 2 seasons ago, there were talks of the French league having no sponsorship. Do you know how crazy it is? Like
yeah,
the French league was consistently top five leagues in the world. They were
yeah.
not going to have broadcast sponsorship because no one wants to watch the French league. Um,
Though.
so I want to highlight something here. Remember the Mbappe saga when the
Yeah,
president had to come in
yeah,
to get him to leave? It
yeah.
was because when he leaves, the financial
Nobody
blow
would
to the
watch.
French
Yeah,
was was incredible. So nobody wanted him to leave. It wasn't even about the selfishness of PSG or anything. The
yeah,
French league was going to suffer, so no one wanted him to leave. So
Charlie.
I want to start with that to tell you the context of where the French league itself is. It
Yeah.
doesn't have a lot of revenue coming in,
You know what?
and
Let's put a pin. Instead of talking about the Olympic Leon, don't talk about it anymore.
you've got excited. You've
Yeah,
got excited.
put the pin
This is
there.
why I don't like.
Put the pin there. Put the pin there. Whoever is listening, you can blame me for it. I don't care. Put a pin there. And we'll definitely
No,
do a detailed episode on football finances, especially post COVID, because we've seen the crisis rage from Barcelona throughout a lot of clubs in the
Bordeaux
world.
was sent
Like,
to the lower leagues.
so it's
Bordeaux.
insane.
Bordeaux was challenging in the Champions League like 2014, right?
Yeah,
Just 10 years ago, they were challenging. So Olympic Lyon, for example, now has been given the provisional
yeah,
relegation,
relegation.
and we must note that it's also for financial malpractices. But when the league says financial malpractices, we need to be very careful here because
Yeah,
what the league is also constantly doing is changing the rules in order
yeah.
for clubs to become regulation.
Like I
Also
said,
because
put the pin in it because
no, I just wanted to
let's
give the context of the Olympic Lyon situation, right?
don't
That
so don't give it again. Keep it. Keep it.
Come and talk about it.
Keep it. We'll be back. Most likely, maybe next week or in the next 2 weeks. We'll definitely do an episode on it. Just two more questions. The first one is Nemanja Vidic was having an interview about Manchester United. Obviously, they are all on this Amorim high level. They'll come down soon, don't worry. Then they are there doing their thing. And then they interviewed Vidic, and he says that, there's this popular notion out there that players are under so much pressure. And he says he doesn't think Manchester United players are under that much pressure at this point. He even doesn't think they're under enough pressure. And he's calling on fans to go to stadiums and put them under more pressure because that's what they need. They need to feel the pressure to rise up to the occasion. I don't know. Maybe it is me who is being too Gen Z, but do you agree that football players, specifically Manchester United players, are not experiencing the pressure they actually ought to experience?
I, I'm trying to, as much as possible, see where he's coming
He's
from.
coming from here.
I think if you look at if you look at for in the context, you need to give grant this year is that Vidic was a part of like a super Manchester United squad that was consistently
Yeah.
winning championship, and the level of demands and pressure on them was way higher than you
Yeah.
are seeing now. I think the expectation on the Manchester United players now is at an all-time low. Like people don't expect big things from them, just like the basic minimum, like
Yeah.
fight for the bag and things like that. So if you put it in that context, then perhaps the pressure is just not enough. But I think another context you're also missing is that these crop of players who play for Manchester United now, some of them are quite young players.
Yeah.
And it's different when you come to a club and everything is working so well. Like even as employees, when you get to a company and everything is working so well, you know your place, you know what exactly you need to do, so you settle in and you quickly get to it and you hit the road running. It's different when the place is chaotic. It's different to deliver your best within a chaotic environment.
Yeah.
So I think in that regard, fans need to manage their expectations a bit. And that being said, like you said, we've seen many instances where the level of pressure put on players like Rashford, Anthony, Garnacho has been immense.
Yeah.
So if he's looking for just people to replicate the pressure which has traditionally been at United,
Yeah.
fine. But I think the true question is it a lack of pressure? Like, is the problem at United a lack of fan pressure or a lack of fan expectation? I don't think it is. I think it's deeper than that. And I think it is a bit superficial to only suggest that when fans go to stadiums and then sort of put more pressure on players, that
Yeah.
is what would lead to them delivering better performances. Like to get better, you need to do more in training. You need to eat the right food. You need to have tactics which is working. You need to be aggressive on the pitch.
Yeah.
None of that part seems to be improved with increased scrutiny from
For
fans
me,
within the stadium.
I look at it and I'm like, I don't think the effects of pressure in his time will probably be the effects of pressure now. Because even if they had pressure at the time, I am sure the pressure was out of positive expectation rather than out of frustration of fans. So it's more like fans were mounting pressure because they know that like you are capable of winning, you would win, and usually that pressure made you win. Also now the psychological framework of people have changed. Our understanding of mental health has evolved so much. Um, People are able to recognize the effect of things on them. And it also means that when fans are putting pressure on you out of frustration, the implications are different from when they are. So when fans are putting pressure on City players, their response to it will be entirely different from if they are putting pressure on this current, what do you call it? The Portuguese team, West Ham players,
West
right? Because their context is different. And so I think that's what maybe is missing in terms of that context. But one final thing that has happened, or maybe the trend for international football this week, has been that players have been withdrawing a lot from from their call-ups. They ghost their national teams. Hurricane came out frustrated about England players ghosting their national team. There's a similar context in Ghana. Ghana, Cardi, I don't even want to talk about their wahala, their football wahala for failing to
Let's
qualify.
skip Ghana. Let's not talk about Ghana today.
So the question I'm asking is, people are starting to blame club managers for being dubious about the way in which they are going around releasing players for national team assignments. Do you think that this is the first point at which we are starting to see the effects of high game scheduling for football? Because now it's compelling clubs to be a lot more protective of their players. And maybe we thought that it would mean that the best players will not be available. But probably what it means is that the best players would not be available for international games because clubs are starting to be much more protective of them. Uh, should we be scared from the trajectory that we are seeing?
I have two distinct school of thoughts.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know how they relate to each other, but the first is that it seems to me that there's one cycle where we are seeing managers manufacture a problem,
yeah,
pin it on national teams, and then
yeah,
take actions that justify, take actions that sort of like justify their decision on the basis of that problem.
yeah,
So, for example, I've forgotten who was asked about national teams and the scheduling.
yeah.
And yes, it's true that there is scheduling fatigue, but national team football accounts for
Very
a
minor,
less than
minute,
10%.
minute version.
Yes, less than 10% of the games that a player is going to play within the
Yeah,
season. So a player is more likely to play more games with
yeah,
their club
yeah,
than with the national team. As simple as simple as that. And there's even been talks where, like, for a lot of players, going to the national team is nice.
yeah,
It's good. It's a good break away from camp, club football, because they get the opportunity to go and see their families, spend time with their families, and go away of a sort. I
yeah,
know it still takes a toll on them, the travel, the things like that. But if you think about it in that context, apart from the week where they are playing the football, it mostly doesn't affect them. Of course, there are concerns about them playing games back to back, things like that. But
yeah,
you see that most of the players, if it's unless they're important games, they are not playing all the minutes. They are coming back early. Clubs are taking measures to ensure that, for example, you are getting flights to bring them back and things like that.
yeah,
So, of course, the scheduling, but is this solved by teams not going to national team to play football? I don't think so. But I think there's also a general annoyance with uh, the whole manufacture of games, like the UEFA Nations League, like
yeah,
the Club World Cup, like so many games, like a lot of friendly games, which you would say, is it important for these players to play in? And I think the question that national teams need to start asking themselves is also this: do you want to play with these guys all the time? Like, for the funny thing is that for big clubs, they have the luxury of not playing Cole Palmer and Co and still
yeah,
win.
exactly.
Small clubs need to play most of the good players. So they even feel the pressure. But where do you see people dropping out?
The
It
big
is
clubs,
teams who belong to big clubs
like I
who
don't really get it.
most likely most likely would be have the luxury of being rested amongst a number of things. So really, it looks like it's a manufactured problem
Yeah,
from managers, and then them taking the action in that regard. But I think the other part also is that there are legitimate concerns about the work schedule. And what it would mean is that club managers will look at the slightest opportunity to be
yeah,
able to get some rest for their players, which means because of the high level of competition, the imagination now is that these clubs players are going to go, so they will come back tired, and we would be well rested and ready to go. Like
yeah,
the point
yeah.
of every week is very important. So if it's affecting
They'll finish and come
the
and get
players,
draw and be 8 points off
yes,
Liverpool.
Yes. So if you go for 4 international breaks and you're always dropping points, calculate how much it compounds. So the level of competition is pushing clubs to do
Yeah,
anything they can to like protect the players in the area. But I also think that what's also happening is that because there's been I think all of these actions are geared towards putting pressure on the UEFA and
UEFA
the
and
FIFA.
FIFA.
Yes, because this discourse helps to ask the question. But
Yeah,
second, you are seeing an active role taken by football agents, football players themselves, and
yeah,
managers to protect their players. They are
yeah.
saying if you are not going to protect
Even
them, the,
national team managers like Portugal just sent back Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, Cristiano Ronaldo, Pedro Neto, Joao Felix, all their top players after they secured the qualification for the Nations League. They have another game. They just sent the top players back to their clubs and said, "We are not playing you anymore. You can go back. We are playing the young guys." Which means you are also starting to see situations where the national team managers themselves are going to be actively denying people game time just because they think they don't want them to be fatigued. And that's also going to
yes,
reduce the quality of international games as well.
yes, yes. So I mean, when we discussed this topic, one of the things we spoke about was just like the how the quality of games is going to be affected, and we're
Yeah,
already seeing it. Like if Portugal is playing against whoever now, no one cares about it, and if no one cares about it, then what's the point of the game? So it's
yeah,
like now we are playing the games for playing sake, and I think that the real question here is what we do about the schedule,
yeah,
and in order to do anything about it, given linking it back to the financial problems, in order to do anything about it, we need to have some uncomfortable conversations.
yeah,
We need to
yeah,
have conversations about player wages because
yeah.
it's too much. Like it's too much, and
Huge.
even then, the inequality in
Yeah,
between clubs
and the
is just
transfers
too
as
much.
well, transfer fees.
Yes, yes. So for me, like if
You cannot buy
there's
you for
there's a
100 million, and you don't want them to play you for as many matches to get their money back. Like,
you get, and now
yeah,
if the quality of competitions is being affected, it's not just for the fans. For example, Nations League, would a sponsor be comfortable
yeah,
sponsoring, knowing that the
yeah,
best players won't be playing in here? The level of sponsorship is going to take a nosedive, which
yeah.
goes in turn to affect like uh the interested parties. So I
That's true.
think it's time to have the uncomfortable conversations, but
Yeah,
listen.
definitely. We would have the uncomfortable conversations. A lot of them actually here on the Shaft podcast, on Beer Parlour episode. So thanks for joining. Thanks Erasmus for starting with the greetings, just to make me feel like I'm the respectful one. And yeah,
Next thing
thanks
come.
everyone for please let's just have an agreement, and you should stop this greeting thing because me, I open the show and ask you a question, then you start with good morning and good
So
evening.
give me an intro. How should I come in? How should I
Just
come into
respond
the
to the question
episode?
I ask you. You don't have to greet people. You deliberately do it to make me appear disrespectful. But no worries. Chelsea fans, I'll be here. Yeah, let Chelsea lose a game. I'll be back. But anyway,
But we need to
thanks
talk about
everyone.
Amorim because I watched this video. I was very, very impressed.
Please, we're impressed about Ten Hag. Media, let's shift and move on to let's move on to impactful things. So yeah, until he makes me impressed by his actions, I don't care about his videos. Like, what did Graham Potter not do at Chelsea with all his videos and YouTube? Watch the training, and he's doing a very energetic challenge. Still tears. So thanks everyone, and see you on the next episode of the Beer Parlour. Have an amazing week.